started working with ConsortiaManager, and we are hoping that this is something that'll make everyone's renewal and purchasing experience much more seamless with Califa. Uh, Essentially, Carrie's going to go into all the great things it can do. And if you ever have any questions at any time, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here to help, and I can always jump on for a quick call.
All right. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this screen okay. All right, Kathy, I'm going to leave you in charge of admitting people at this point, but just bug me if you need anything. Throughout this conversation too, please feel free to use the chat function if you have questions about the site as we go through it. There's really no need to hold your questions until the end. A lot of stuff can come up on the page that you might have questions about now, and I'm sure other people have the same questions, so please feel free to ask. We're just going to start off on the main page for now. The URL is just ConsortiaManager.com. You don't particularly need to remember that because Kathy is actually going to be sending out credentials on Thursday after our second training. We're just going to go ahead and prompt you to log into the site, and it will give you a system-generated password so that you can initially log into the site yourself. Of course, we highly encourage that you change the password once you do log in, and I'll go over how to do that closer to the end of our session. When you get to this page, you will, of course, just click the login button. You will enter your email address, the one that Kathy contacted you at, and then, of course, the system-generated password. And if you ever forget it at any point, just click the forgot your password to get an email to reset that information. Okay, I'm going to move over to our demo page. This is going to look slightly different than yours, simply because we wanted some dummy information here. And there's a lot of bells and whistles on this demo site, but I'll go over exactly what you will see. All in all, it is very similar. When you log into the site, you will originally see this page. It's kind of a dashboard. And Kathy's posted the link to the site in the chat, by the way. You'll see this dashboard page. There's a lot of stuff you can see on this page. It kind of culminates all of your numbers together and anything you might want to look at the minute you log into the site. You'll see this move element in several different places. So if you want to organize your page, feel free to do so. You can move these boxes around as you see fit. And then additionally, you're going to see some things here that notate your upcoming renewals and anything that we identify as newly added. So that means something that typically within the past 2 weeks, Kathy has added to the catalog. This could be renewals, this could be new offers, just something bright and shiny that we might want to draw your attention to. You're then going to see pricing for 2020. So mostly with 2020 coming to a close, this is things you've already decided. You probably won't have as much pending here. In 2021, you'll see we have some pending renewals for this demo library. And of course, this E just sort of notates that this is all an estimate. Since 2021, there could be a lot of renewals that maybe we haven't negotiated pricing for quite yet. You'll also see your latest emails from the system. So this is mostly stuff that would be coming from Kathy to you. So things like an order confirmation, or if she sent you an email and said, hey, pricing is available, please go ahead and take a look at the catalog, which we'll do momentarily. All that information lives here. There's several other places in the site where you can see emails that are generated from Kathy to your institution. This is just one place. Scrolling down the page here, I can also see we have what's called an agreement overview. This will be a little bit easier to explain in the catalog. Just know for now that an agreement can include a bundle of products. It's all sort of as they're related to each other. So if you subscribe to some kind of journal package, Kathy has probably organized that under an agreement name that makes sense so that she can contact the vendor about this related titles all in one go. Down here, I can also get a list of my pending subscriptions, my accepted or my canceled resources. Canceled and rejected for our sense and purposes mean the same thing. If you ever want to see a list of exactly what you've canceled, you can click here, and we'll be going over that in the subscriptions tab up here in a moment as well. If I scroll down, I can also see a couple graphs of my total spend per year, and I can also get an idea of exactly what the split is between my new content versus what I'm renewing. Lastly, on this dashboard page, I can see what recent actions have been taken in the system. So it looks like I've accepted some pricing. And of course, like I said, you can not only move these around, you can also get rid of them if you want to click this X and just get rid of one of these boxes if it's not serving you in any way. If you want to pull something back, maybe that you've accidentally erased off the site, just click this wrench and you'll have the option to pull any of these design elements back on the page. Okay, so moving on from there, you're probably wondering the most about, okay, how do I process renewals through this site, which is primarily why Califa has moved over to using ConsortiaManager. It's a really good way of tracking when things are purchased, when they were purchased, by who, and to do some budget planning for things that are upcoming. So we're going to talk about the catalog, and I can get there in a number of ways. I can either get there from this dashboard directly, or I can click up here at the catalog. Let's go here for one moment, just because if I click here, I'm going to get some very detailed renewal information if I have any. So I can see here that this particular library has 3 subscriptions under this particular agreement. If there's any product information here, I could choose to review that at this point in time. And if there's any detailed pricing information, I could also look at that. So I've got some pricing information hanging out down here. From here, if I had order options, you mostly would be using the catalog to place your renewals. They're probably not necessarily as nitty-gritty as this one. Order options is where you would go if you wanted to see that price change in percentage very specifically. If you wanted to do something like add a note to this subscription, or if Kathy had even left you some kind of note, or if it was a resource where, let's say, you had to identify the number of simultaneous users you wanted on that subscription. So like I said, 9 times out of 10, we're going to be going to the catalog. You have a very clear idea of probably what you want to renew already. But if you do have stuff that's a little more detailed, you could come here. All right, and of course, you can also cancel from here if you need to. But let's go ahead and go over to the catalog before we actually place any orders. So going to the catalog, I'm going to see I have a big long list of resources. I'm probably not going to actually wade through over 1,000 resources that I could purchase from the consortia, but anything that I could purchase is available in this catalog. So it's kind of like Amazon shopping. Anything I would want is available to me here. I can see anything here that's marked as in would be a new product to me. So something I have not purchased at least last year. This would be brand new. I can also get a little bit more information by clicking on the agreement or the product. So let's go ahead and do that now. The agreement is going to have the bulk of information on it if you want to have a deeper dive into exactly what is offered from that particular vendor on that agreement. So Kathy has been working on content summaries for the agreement or pricing information that could be included here. So a really good example, this is a very complex pricing model. Maybe it's a multi-journal package kind of deal, something like that. You could also track any agreement history. Looks like we haven't had much here. And honestly, this library is not going to have anything because they haven't purchased this resource either. They can also see what products are listed in this agreement. So maybe these can be purchased in different kinds of bundles. They can get a sense of how popular this agreement has been. So I can actually see the number without necessarily needing to see exactly who the other subscribers are. I can check out the price per year, the publisher information, which Kathy has been putting into the system. That's been imported. We'll talk about license information here momentarily. Oh, we do have a question. I'm going to pause for a second. We had a question about going through the renewals process if they have a contract in place. So Kathy, maybe you want to step in and answer that real quick.
Sure. So San Francisco is sort of one of our special cases. So for that, we're going to continue on with the contract process. So you don't have to worry so much about this, but it is useful for looking at other things you might want to add or things that fall outside of the contract.
Perfect. Yeah, there's a lot of new information here, especially if it's content that you don't currently subscribe to, or if you want to take a look at license information, a lot of information here. So we'll come back to this license. Just know that you can view it here on the agreement page. Scrolling down, I can also see, and this is something that you can collectively decide as a consortia, or maybe Kathy has an answer. If you want to see what other libraries in your consortia are subscribing to those resources, maybe to get a sense of what other similar size universities are buying the content, that is something we could turn on if it's something you wanted to use. Right now it is not turned on, so it's more towards the privacy side. You can also include any links here, or Kathy could include links that might pertain to products on this agreement, and then any comments, notes, or attachments. Both your library and the consortium can attach any kind of file onto the agreement that you want. Just keep in mind, if you attach it to the agreement, it's going to be shared with the entire consortium. You have several places where you can include attachments that are just internal. Just keep in mind that this is if you would want to share something with everybody. All right, going back to our catalog here. The product page is a lot smaller. It's really going to pertain to title lists, if that's something that would be available there that you need to take a look at. And if there's any metadata maybe that Kathy has added, but like I said, your product page is a lot less robust than that agreement page. So the agreement page is going to give you the most information about that content. All right, so going back to the catalog, it's probably not likely we're going to be using this very often, but this is great. If you ever see this button for request price, that gives you the option to send Kathy an email to ask for pricing. This is also going to be tracked in ConsortiaManager. So if your colleague logs on tomorrow, they'll be able to know that you already asked for pricing for Science Classic, so they don't need to repeat that step. So anytime you see something like that, maybe that you want pricing for that you don't have, this is basically your quote request functionality through the system. So I'm going to filter out of here and move over to the option of has prices. So now not only am I seeing brand new content, I'm also seeing some things marked are for renewal. So these are obviously all resources that I've subscribed to last year. So now it's time for me to make a decision because Kathy has already entered pricing for me. I can see actually she's done this. This bright shiny star tells me it's recently published. So again, she's worked on that within the past couple of weeks. And then of course I can also decide from here to either place it in the shopping basket or cancel it from here. This is something I don't want. You can put things in the shopping basket until we complete the shopping basket order. It has not officially been placed with a consortia. So you can move things in and out of the shopping cart, again, just like Amazon, as many times as you'd like. The other thing worth pointing out here before we move on is you'll notice a deadline on many of these subscriptions. It is important that you respond whether or not you want to renew or cancel by the deadline, or the system will make that decision for you based on how Kathy has it set up. Sorry, just reading something in the chat. If you're not the point person, okay, Kathy, it sounds like Kathy's going to respond to if someone's requesting renewals, but they're not the point person to request purchase orders. One thing that I can assure you is you can have multiple contacts in ConsortiaManager and they can have different permission levels. So if you need to have a team of people using this resource, you can absolutely do that. All right, so just talking about the deadline, it's very important that you make sure that you don't miss that. Otherwise, the system will take an action whether to renew or cancel on your behalf. And Kathy, maybe you can step in and remind me, if they do not respond, do you typically reject a resource or mark it as a cancellation, or does it get renewed automatically?
For this purposes, what we're going to do is we're going to say that it's a rejection just to be able to get people to do that. But I will say that for the next year at least, I'm still going to be reaching out to everyone in the standard way, double checking, making sure that if you haven't responded in ConsortiaManager, that I do get a verbal yes, no from you or something in writing. So it's not like it's going to magically disappear. I'm going to be continually checking in.
Yeah, and that brings me to another point. Kathy's functionality on the back end also allows her to send reminders to anybody who has not responded, even if you just have something in the shopping cart that hasn't been confirmed. So she actually has a bird's eye view of who's not responded to what subscriptions well before and even after the deadline. So there's plenty of opportunities for her to send out a reminder and prompt you to use the site. And then also, she has the opportunity to push something back out to the site if you do miss that deadline. So be mindful of that, but also know that there will be a lot of communication before that deadline happens, with the goal being that you have the opportunity to make that decision and the system won't do it. Moving over, just to give you an idea, you can also filter this based on resources that are starting after today's date if you want to. You can also do renewals only. And then this last option for recently published is all the stuff that Kathy has worked on recently, like I said, the past 2 weeks. So let's go ahead and add a couple things to the cart that it looks like we're ready to move forward with. I'm going to go ahead and add a few things here. All right, everything there is ready to go. If I have something else, and let's say I want to reject it, I mentioned that that was a possibility. I can just click this X. And if I ever want to call this back, let's say I made that rejection on accident, all I have to do is add it to the shopping cart, and that will go ahead and take it out of the rejected pile. All right, so I'm going to move over from there into the shopping basket. Once I get to the shopping basket, I have a few options for things I can do. First of all, you'll notice that these are once again organized by the agreements. So I have a couple subscriptions tucked under this one agreement. These are my 2 renewals. This is something that's brand new to me. I acknowledge you will probably not be buying anything in British pounds, but we can do things in other currencies if that ever is an issue. Here, what you probably want to pay attention to is you have a notes section in case you want to leave any notes for yourself and your team. You can also edit this so that you can include a purchase order number so that the library has a purchase order number that the consortia can then reference on any invoicing. So someone asked, is ConsortiaManager configurable? In other words, have the radio button say recently added rather than recently published, because I know that will confuse the staff in my library. So that is hard coded into the site. So that text will not change. That recently published. And the reason that we use that terminology is because when Kathy puts something out on the site, she's usually worked on it for a few weeks or even a few months before it gets what we call published. So published essentially means that It's now no longer just internal for Kathy. She's now turning it over to the members so that they can see it and actively make a decision with that. That's the purpose of that terminology. So here you can go ahead and add a purchase order number. If you have any different billing addresses, you of course have a default billing address that Kathy's already brought into the system, but you have the option to add alternate billing addresses. So if you need to select something even for a specific subscription, that would appear in a drop-down list and you could be able to choose that. Agents work the same way, just in case you do anything where you're allowed to bill through an agent. Then I can also see my pricing here. And if for any reason I've put this in the shopping cart and I've made a mistake, I can back it out. Now that doesn't mean I've canceled the resource, it just pushes it back into the catalog. I could always order it at another time if I want to. Anything I've got in the shopping cart right now is going to be ordered together. So just keep that in mind. If you have stuff that needs to be invoiced separately, you might want to place those orders separate from one another. There's a good question. Will we be getting an email notification when a renewal is due? Yes, so I mentioned a little bit earlier that Kathy has access to a task in her workflow called Send Reminders, and she can actually set up how many days in advance before that deadline that she sends out a reminder, and she can do that an infinite number of times. And of course, it's only going to send an email to anyone who still hasn't responded, so you won't get 10 emails in one day or anything like that. Yeah. And then Jennifer asked, are you able to access invoices on this website as well? We do have an option. Yeah, Kathy, you want to?
I'm going to jump in. We're still going to be using our the base. We have QuickBooks is what we use, so it's not going to be put into the system directly. But if you ever need extra invoices, you can always just reach out to me.
And you can, of course, track your orders through here. So even if you're being invoiced separately, you'll still have all the information at your fingertips to see what orders you placed that would generate an invoice. All right, of course, if you need to print this, maybe to ask for a purchase order number or anything like that, feel free to do so. But other than that, we're pretty much ready to go. I can either place this order by grabbing everything on this agreement. If I had a big long list of stuff in my cart, I could just click up here and grab everything. Or you can even just order one thing at a time. Completely up to you. There's a lot of flexibility with how you do that. There's a question about how early are renewal prices available before the renewal date. Kathy, I'll let you respond to that one as well.
Hi, Christina. So this is something we've been asking for I've been asking the vendors for 6 months in advance. So for what I'm looking at right now, what should be available in the system will be January through June. That, however, is easier said than done. Some publishers or some vendors are kind of a little resistant. So I've gotten most of everything and the rest should be filling in the next few weeks. So I'm trying to do it in 6 month batches. The next one, the July renewals, will most likely be available. I'm aiming for April for those, but we'll see. Knock on wood.
And when Kathy does have pricing available, in addition to, of course, sending you reminders about those renewals, when we do that step that we call publish offers, that's actually where she has the option to email you and let you know new pricing is available in the system. Please log on and take a look. So yeah, there's several touches from the system like that Kathy will be generating as she kind of checks things off her to-do list so that you will be able to know when to log into the site. You won't have to just log in and look for things daily. She will prompt you to do so through those actions. All right, so from there, if I wanted to, if you need to upload any kind of file, if you do have like a copy of a purchase order you need to attach, feel free to do so. Kathy will see that when you upload it. Other than that, you're good to go ahead and place your order. So I'm gonna go ahead and place this one on behalf of this institution. And now it's gonna drop out of my catalog because I've already placed the order for it. So I don't need to do anything else with it. All right, so from there, that one's good to go. I'll also see that I have an email for my subscription order confirmation in a moment. That is going to be automatically generated from Kathy because at that point, Kathy's going to get that order back from me and she's going to know, all right, now I'm ready to send that off to the vendor and probably do so with the rest of the group for anybody else who subscribed to that exact same resource on that exact same agreement. So she can do those in a batch. So we have a question, what's the difference between the catalog and subscriptions? So the subscriptions are the resources that you subscribe to, right? Those have a timely date. The catalog is just what you use to look at them in a collective order. So just think of it like if you were going shopping and you had an old JCPenney catalog and you were kind of looking through at all the things you could buy, that's the catalog, but obviously you're not going to buy everything in the catalog. You're probably going to be renewing subscriptions you've had before, But if you want to buy something new, this is a really good place to also get details about new resources that maybe you want to add. It's a good chance to look at the license agreement, check out the pricing, see how popular it is with other members in the consortium before you move forward with purchasing something new. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the subscriptions as well. So yeah, this is our catalog. We can kind of take a glimpse at everything overall. So let's clarify what the subscription page is. The subscriptions, this is content that I've already subscribed to. So I've already paid for this content. It is either active, historical, or upcoming subscriptions. So this is automatically filtered for 2020, but I could back this out and actually see everything that we've ever tracked in ConsortiaManager. Kathy has also imported a fair amount of historical information, so you'll also be able to see that here. So if you want to see pricing and things like that, of course, you can pull more detailed reports than this if you would like, but this will give you your basic information about the agreement, the product, the periods, and the pricing that you've paid. If you want a few more columns here, please feel free to go ahead and just add any of these toggle columns. So if you had included reference numbers, or if Kathy was tracking things like list pricing and you wanted to compare that, you're more than welcome to do so. So this is kind of your historical repository for what has gone on, what has your library actually purchased over the past few years. All right, and again, of course, you can always access the agreement page here. That's going to have all the license information, any in-depth pricing information, or any summary. So if you ever had, like a resource where you viewed a paragraph about a particular product or about a particular journal package, that's probably going to live under the agreement, whereas your title list and information like that would live under this product page. So when in doubt, check out the agreement page if you're looking for some detailed information. Jennifer asked, how far back is the historical information? Kath, you'll have to remind me how far back we imported data. Was it 3 years maybe?
It's just the past year is what we have. We have okay. On my end up to, I believe, 3 years for most libraries. If you would like me to add specifically for your library something further back, let me know and I can go ahead and build that into the system.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you'll have some content when you go in, and of course, the longer you use the system, the more historical data points you have, the easier it is to track pricing increases, things like that. So yeah, the more data in the system, the better. But of course, we never recommend that our consortia spend 2 years getting 7 years worth of data ready. That's a lot of content. As we all know, subscriptions move pretty quickly and can change vendor to vendor, and it's a lot of detailed information for one person to input. All right, so moving on from there, we've gone through how to order everything. Now we've got a couple other things that we're going to go through. When I click on this More button, you're going to see a lot of bells and whistles. You don't have all of these. This is the one differentiation from the demo site and your site. So I'm going to go over the ones that are really going to apply to you. Namely, we're going to start with the license summary. I have told Kathy not to worry about this, particularly in the beginning. Licenses are really a nice to have part of the system. I'm sure that she is spending the majority of her time right now focused on pricing so that you have that in hand to make those renewal decisions. But at some point down the road, if Kathy has some time to dig into the license information, she can start to include those agreements on the site, as well as pull out some of these terms, and she can identify the license terms that are most important and kind of pull these out, so that you can get an idea of exactly what is allotted for each individual agreement. And this is true whether or not you subscribe to this license or not. So we had a question, in placing orders, does that mean we are signing and binding our library to that agreement? That authority falls on our purchasing staff. Kathy, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how purchasing should work?
Sure. By placing orders, I'm considering it, at least in my mind, exactly the same as if I reach out to you with the quote, you you agree over email. That is when we begin the invoicing process and everything, and that's what we consider binding to a point. Obviously, if something comes up or something happens, we can always talk with the vendors, but it is something that the purchasing staff should be leading.
Yeah, and if anything, this is a more secure way than that email methodology, because it really will track who exactly ordered something. You can set permissions on some of the user accounts, which we'll get into in a minute. It's a lot more easy to identify exactly when something was ordered by who, and then it's also easier to pull back depending on what point it is in the purchasing process. So Kathy has a little bit more tools at her disposal to help out with that process. And of course, Kathy, you and I can talk about this offline, but if there needs to be more stringent purchasing processes. There's a couple things that you can do on the back end in the shopping cart to prevent that from going so far. A good question come up about license information. They've emphasized that's really important to their system. Can they see the vendor's license agreements? So Michelle, this is exactly where that information would live. But like I said, it's a big project. It's a really big project to go through all the license agreements that your consortia is probably working with and pulling out some of those license terms and getting a copy of that in there. And Kathy, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that's probably not on your plate, at least for the next 6 months.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to try and get some easy wins first. I'm going to be reaching out to the vendors to give me some updated, because I'm sure some of their product information is pretty outdated already in ConsortiaManager. So I'm going to ask them for updated content summary. I'm going to ask for the license, and I'm also going to try and get that list pricing, which only a few vendors have provided so far. So I'm going to try and hit all those points.
Yeah, those are all really helpful, education points when trying to determine those renewals. And like I mentioned on this license page, even if you don't subscribe, you can still take a look at the license. So that's especially helpful if maybe you're thinking about buying something, but you want to know what the license terms are before going down that road. Again, this is going to take us right back to that agreement page. And if we have pulled out some of those license terms, that's all going to be available in this license information section. So any comment that Kathy's left, but more importantly, these terms are going to be pretty well identified for you. And Kathy has the opportunity to identify what these should be and kind of give them some helper text. So yeah, lots that she can do here. All right, let me see if there's anything else in the license summary we need to go over. Also too, the stuff that this library subscribes to is going to show up closer to the top. So you'll see that this is filtered for yes from the beginning, but if you scroll down, that's where I could see the things that maybe I don't subscribe to yet. Because we're kind of assuming you probably want to see the license agreements for content you already have before you'd be looking at new content. All right, moving on from there, the other section you're going to see here is your renewals page, which is not too dissimilar actually to what we were looking at from the dashboard. So if I went back to the dashboard and I had gone to my renewals here directly, very similar. I've just got it in the basket now, so I don't have much to do here, but that's exactly what we went over at the very beginning. A couple more things here. Materials. This is a Dropbox that Kathy can use to include any kind of documents that she wants to share with the group, especially consortial documents. That's a really good example of something she might want to throw in there. I don't know if you had a vendor day or something, or even training videos, something like that. We do also have a user manual. So everything that I've gone over today, I've also written up in a Word document that I will pass along to Kathy. She can, take anything out that's not applicable or add something that is specific to Califa members, and then either include that information here, or we also have a help section. So that could also live in the help section. That's very similar to the materials. It kind of just gives you a better idea of maybe if you're stuck, where to go. So I would actually recommend that the training manual, and then additionally today's recording and potentially Thursday's recording as well, can live in a training documentation section here, which Kathy can build on your site. Beyond that, we also have the support tickets is another thing that you have on your site. So if something has gone wrong and you need to make a support ticket, this is basically just kind of contact Kathy if you do have an issue with something. It just gives her an idea about something that could be going wrong on the site. If it pertains to an IP address, feel free to fill that out. And she can keep tabs on that. And then I also want to go over your reports. And actually, Kathy, while I'm here, there's a couple things that I'm seeing on your site that we could add if you want to, and you don't have to make the decision today, but I could choose to add either the contact form or the address book. This would just allow members to contact either someone at the consortia or someone at the publisher level or a license manager and send them an email through the system. So if you did need to send something directly to the publisher, then ConsortiaManager can track that information again, so you don't have to get in and out of your inbox for that. And then your colleagues can also see that. The other thing that you can make a decision about is the address book. So it's very similar to the contact form. It just provides you with a full list of the contacts, both in the consortium, so consortium staff, the library institution members, and then also the publisher contact information. So Kathy, you can let me know if you would like to turn that on or not. I'm happy to do whatever you'd like. Okay, the last thing here that we're going to go over is the reports page. Kathy can pre-build some reports for you. She might choose to do so that they're ready to go. Especially as Kathy starts working on getting things like list pricing, that's going to be really helpful in pulling things like a cost avoidance report. That cost avoidance report is going to share with you, once she has a substantial amount of list pricing, exactly what that cost is, what the consortia paid, and then of course you get an idea of exactly how much the consortia is saving, how much you are saving by purchasing through the consortia versus individually, assuming you are paying that list price. You can also create a wide variety of reports from this page. You would probably be doing, there's a lot of options here, I know. You would probably mostly be looking at a subscriptions report. So you can pull a lot of things like the agreement name, the member name. If you're pulling this, is always going to be yourself. You can't pull anybody else's information from this page. It's just going to pull for your own library. So no worries if you build a report here and save it, no one else is going to see that information except for, of course, Kathy. So just to show you an example, I could build this, look at a couple of different things, look at my pricing. All right, let's say that's good to go. And then I could just kind of refresh it, make sure this looks the way it looks I want. And then I could scroll down the page and decide to generate the report and or save the report. If you save the report, of course, it just means you can run it again in the future. And when you generate it, all that means is it's going to be emailed to you so that it runs in the background. You don't have to wait for this page to load, especially if it's a really large subscription report. So lots of things you can do there. It's also worth mentioning if you build a report, let's say it is called 2021 subscriptions, and you set up these parameters and then you want to run it 6 months from now, the system will know to pull any new subscriptions that you've added since you made the original saved report. All right, so now I'm going to move over. Your quick search is exactly how it sounds. If you need to dig into anything and just take a peek, it's going to show up like this. So this is kind of just your global search in case you were looking for something specifically, whether that's a contact or even an EBSCO agreement that you participate in, something like that, or a product. So it's kind of organized here similar to how the rest of the site is. The last things we're going to dig into are over on this profile page. We're going to spend a little bit of time here before we wrap up. So every library has a page that looks like this. It's mostly already been populated by Kathy, so she's done a lot of the hard work for you. The FTE, you're going to see that information up here. That is editable, so please feel free to go ahead and edit that as you need to. Jennifer's also asked when this goes live. So this is our staging site for now, but we do have a live site for Califa that Kathy is already working on. So you will be able to access that when she sends out those credentials on Thursday. And I would assume that would be Thursday afternoon after our second training.
Correct, yep.
And the second training is going to cover exactly the same stuff as today. So if you've come today, no need to come on Thursday. Okay. So if you have FTE information, keep in mind, Kathy probably has some different metrics here. This is just for our demo, but you are invited to go in and edit this information and update it as you see fit. And of course, your FTE information can determine a lot to do with pricing. So making sure that that's accurate is very helpful to Kathy.
Yep, the ones we have in the system are, the main one is library service population, which I took from the PDF that the state library sent out for 2020. But the card holders, that needs to be updated, as well as full-time employees. That's another metric that a few of the vendors use.
Perfect. Yeah, so please go in and take a look. Like Kathy said, she's done a lot of work to go ahead and get that entered, but there's probably some other metrics that you have at your disposal that you could help her out by entering there. So please feel free to do so. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the user accounts. So as I mentioned, most of these have already been imported into the site. If you get an email that prompts you to go into ConsortiaManager on Thursday, then clearly your email is already in the system. If not, and you need to add someone, you can simply click Add Contacts, and you would go ahead and set this up. Let's go ahead and talk about the account type, because you're going to see this in a couple of different ways. Ignore this one for now. I'm going to point this out in a different location in a second. All right, so basic information, first, last name, and email are really all that's required here in addition to the password. There are several different kinds of emails you can choose to get through the system. You probably won't be doing too much with invoicing since Kathy's going to be doing that separately in QuickBooks, so feel free to ignore that for the time being. But we do have descriptions for the other kinds of emails. So if Kathy does a big project related to licensing, would you want to be contacted about that? In terms of ordering, so if she is sending out, hey, we have new renewal pricing, would you want to be getting a message like that? Multiple people at your institution can be checked to receive these different kinds of emails. So please just know it doesn't matter how many people are checked to get whatever types of emails you prefer. If anything here is left unchecked with all users under your library, the system will default send that to the primary user on the account, which I'll note that in 1 second. If you're setting up someone new, for example, while you can set them up with a password, you can also just have one system generated and sent out to them if you would like. And the user level I want to talk about for a second is here. So you have 3 options here. View only is exactly how it sounds, and the administrator can do everything. Those 2 are pretty explainable. So the distinction is with the user can do everything the administrator can do. So ordering, changing FTE, looking at agreements, looking at licenses, adding attachments. What the user cannot do is edit or change anyone else's account. So they can't go in and update anyone's email notifications. They can't deactivate an account. They can't change the password, nothing like that. And keep in mind that you can have as many of these user types at your institution as you would like. I just recommend that you have at least one administrator that becomes the primary user. But you can have 10 administrators if you like. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, I'm going to go back to this profile page. All right, we talked a little bit about if you need to deactivate a contact. So let's say that Maria Collins has gone on maternity leave and she's not going to be back for quite some time. If you need to deactivate, you can just click up here. That's just going to move it over into the inactive panel that we've got over here. And if that person does come back, you can always just edit it and activate that person again. You might see a couple things that say anonymize or deactivate and anonymize. That's so we can follow European privacy laws. We don't use that so much in the US, but if you wish to anonymize, it's just going to basically erase that person's name from the actions they've taken in the system. So be mindful of that if you do choose to exercise that option. You can always, of course, change the user type if you need to later on. If you need to make somebody a user and administrator, as long as you're an administrator account, you can switch that. You can ignore the subscribing users that won't be present on your account. That's just for our demo here. So we talked a little bit about what's a primary user. So this primary user is highlighted in this darkened icon here. Again, that's one contact per institution. That can be changed by clicking on Edit Library. And it's right here, this fallback recipient for system email. So all the primary contact does is gives us an idea that if there's no one else to contact, or if no one's been selected for, let's say, ordering emails, who should the system reach out to instead? That's really the only function it serves, so that Kathy is never left without a contact at the library. Okay, so that's why you will be prevented from deactivating somebody who's the primary contact, for example, without selecting someone else. This is also where you could add an alternate member name or make sure that your address information is correct. You can probably leave the member and membership type alone. And Kathy, if you want, I can even lock that down if it's not something you should be editing anyways. You've also got a default billing address. You can just copy that to make sure that it's the same, so that when you go to the shopping cart, we can assume it's the same address. Now, your default doesn't mean that's your only billing address that you can use. I'll show you how to add additional options, and you really don't need to mess with anything here. That won't be used super often anyways. You primarily want to pay attention to your default billing address, your member address, and making sure that the name and your primary contact are marked accordingly. Okay, so let's scroll down this page a little bit. This basic information, that's just coming from where we were editing the library. As of this additional information, you won't be using too much of this, so you can ignore that for the time being. We mentioned this is another place where you can review your emails from the system. So our subscription order confirmations that we've placed, any renewal pricing that's been sent to us, not only will that come to our own individual email inboxes, but we can see it here collectively. Okay, so scrolling down the page, we've also got IP addresses. This is something that you can update. What's great about this is that it means Kathy doesn't have to reach out to the vendors individually. The system can just do it on your behalf. So if you do need to either edit an IP address or add one or deactivate one, this is where you could choose to do so and contact all the publishers that you currently work with so you can ensure continued access. So if something changes, we've got some directions down here for exactly how to format that. And you can either choose to just save your new IP address or save it and notify the publisher. So like I said, that's going to send an email out to all of your active publishers and let them know, please update our subscription, please update our account with this new IP address. All right, here we've also got some attachments. If you need to include anything, these are just internal. So if you have like a running purchase order number you want to use for a while, feel free to go ahead and throw it up in the member files. And similarly, if Kathy needed to throw anything up here, that would be included. The last thing worth mentioning, you don't use approval forms so much in the shopping basket, but if you had opted to include any kind of attachment in the shopping basket, it will also show up in this related attachments section. If you want to include any links, again, this is internal use, so feel free to add anything there you would like. We can see that main address and then of course our billing address. If I needed to add an additional address, I can do so here. And then of course I could move this one and make my second address the default address if I needed to. Lastly here, I'm just going to see my order confirmation mails just to verify the things that I've done recently that would generate an invoice. All right, the last couple of things we're going to go over are pretty brief. If you happen to work at, let's say, 2 different libraries that are in Califa, so you would be using ConsortiaManager in 2 different instances, you would click Switch Account. That's going to take you to a list of the other options that you could choose so that you never have to worry about placing renewals at 2 different institutions. You're very clear about which account you're logged into. That probably won't apply to very many of you, but just in case it does, that's how you would toggle back and forth. The last thing to show you here is this interactions. This is just sort of your breadcrumbs list of everything that's been done in the system. This is only going to show you your internal stuff that's been done between you and your team. And then similarly, I believe it will also show if Kathy has done something like update pricing for you and when she did that so that you have an idea of when those things have occurred. That is the system from beginning to end. So any additional questions or Kathy, anything you want to add, now's a great time.
Yep, I just want to add that, thank you, Carrie, this is fantastic.
Sure.
And I'm going to be adding, as I said, more content that I'm getting from the vendors as this goes along. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm going to be setting up some office hours in the coming weeks where it'll just be an open time where I'm going to be on Zoom. But if you can't make those, also feel free to just reach out to me and we can set up a time that works for both of us.
And like I mentioned, this training was recorded, so I'm going to give this recording over to Kathy, and I'm sure that she can share that with anybody who might have missed our training today or maybe on Thursday as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then I will end the meeting. Thank you so much, everyone.